We all want monsters, we want things that are bigger than we are, frightening and hidden, but to be hidden they have to be in lost worlds, and to some extent Loch Ness is a lost world because of its darkness and its depth. That is those elements that quite frankly I'm probably responsible for reducing somewhat. I'm Michael, I'm a naturalist. I lead the Loch Ness Project, which researches Loch Ness, and I have designed the public exhibition called the Loch Ness Centre at Drummond Adracha. Loch Ness is not huge on a world scale, but it is in terms of depth, and it was that aspect which attracted me, and so the search in the seventh is moved underwater, and I was part of that. The problem at Loch Ness was deep, dark, cold water, but there was another log for Rockmora which had clear water and a similar monster tradition. That's where I began in 1973. I built a submarine, a small submersible observation chamber, to exploit that clear water, and I was looking upwards against the daylight on the surface, hoping that something big would swim over the top. But I saw so much more. Even the little tiny plankton would be outside the window, and so I developed a much greater general interest in what was going on in the log. We ended up moving slowly from trying to ambush an anomaly, looking at the general environment, things that were plausible such as the food web. Loch Ness is a cold water environment, and it is surrounded by mountains of very ancient hard rocks which yield extremely few nutrients, that is limiting to reptiles, for example, like the favorite plesiosaur. When I was nearly 8 years old, I was taken by my parents to a little town on the east coast of England called Monthly, and one evening we walked down to the beach, and out towards the horizon we saw a series of fast-moving humps all in line moving across our field of view. That was the first time that I became aware of controversy, the fact that a conventional wisdom, i.e. science, did not believe in sea serpents, and yet witnesses who saw them, I just noticed a small dark shape just out of the corner of my eye. We saw this great neck emerge from the water, and then there was the long neck, and you could see the three humps. Our brains spend a lot of time trying to work out what we're seeing and then telling us that we're seeing it. And so what should be in Loch Ness? It should be a Loch Ness monster. Now the stereotype of the Norwegian sea serpent with its relatively short head, neck, and lots of humps. We explained at Loch Ness it was boat lakes. The Caledonian Canal means that quite large vessels move through, and the wave train left behind them is called a displacement wake, and when viewed from a low angle results in a remarkable illusion of solid humps. Now we were left with the plesiosaur stereotype with its longer necklace, shorter body. Now how could that be? Explain what on Loch Ness has these flexible long necks that we do know, and it might sound outrageous to suggest that these long-necked birds could produce monster sightings because of scale, but consider now as a situation when the water is calm, its flat end doesn't contain recognizable objects. How then do we charge the scale of an object we do not recognize? And the answer is it's very difficult. If we don't recognize the bird and we can't judge the scale, then we are left with an image which is very similar to that famous surgeon's photograph. That is the picture we would all recognize of a Loch Ness monster. It is simply the conclusion of it being a monster because of the perceived scale, and the perceived scale in the absence of evidence of scale comes from expectation. I think if we were to get a fish on the scale that the context would suggest, then I don't think anybody would be too dissatisfied, and all those eyewitnesses would have their vindication. When I present the mystery of the Loch Ness monster, I'm as anxious to show the lessons of what we've actually done. We haven't sat around the lot failing to photograph a Loch Ness monster for 40 years. We learn lessons outside the natural history and more into human perception. Getting elected president is an expensive business campaign. Costs add up. Their advertisements to make travel expenses, convention costs, even bumper stickers. But where does all this money come from? Thank you for your attention. Please check another videos.